Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sandra. Today I'm going to be talking about Morningstar by Pierce Brown. If you have missed my first two videos on Red Rising and Golden Sun, definitely go back and give those a watch. But today I'm so excited to talk about the third book. A, because it kind of wraps up the original trilogy and there's so many things to talk about with this book. But B, I'm super excited to talk about this book with a special guest today. Please welcome my husband, Kyle.
Wow. So special.
Is he really a husband if he doesn't indulge his wife with some of her bookish fancies?
Yeah, Sandra has begged me for years at this point to read any of the books that she reads and basically belittles me for only reading nonfiction.
I don't belittle you.
So here we are. I've read some fiction.
He's one of those people. He tells me that he used to read fiction back in the day. This is the first that I've seen it in a very long time of knowing you. So
Yes. Yeah.
we're excited. I think you've read through all these books faster than I read the first three books. So what have you thought about just in general? Pierce Brown's writing, the story.
Yes. First, I would say that it feels like cheating to have the graphic audio when you're reading. It really helps a lot. Just makes things more interesting. You know, the voices are usually great. Like, hard to complain when you got the graphic audio. Some of the stuff that's been interesting for me reading it has just been his style. Even the pacing, I guess, in particular. So, one of the things he does a lot that I'm not used to, at least, is at the end of a chapter, they'll be right in the middle of the action. So it's not really like where it culminates at the end of the chapter. Usually it's kind of reached the apex, and then that makes you always want to go on and read the next chapter to see how it gets resolved. I would find myself being like, all right, I'll just read one more chapter. And then that chapter would always end on like a bit of a cliffhanger or like something crazy was going on. And then I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll read the second chapter or the next chapter to see how that goes. And then 10 chapters later, and suddenly I've read half the book already.
Yeah, I've been a big fan of Pierce Brown's short, choppy sentences. I feel like that also helps the pacing just feel much faster, and also the action has been really good.
Yeah, I didn't really know what to expect since you've got heavy romance tilt to most of the things that you read. And so I was interested how much romance there was going to be in here. Honestly, there was very little. And most of it was very, I don't know, pedestrian, I guess. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but there's a lot of will they, won't they, but not really much past that, I felt like.
I like how you worded that because we're not really talking spoilers right now, but we'll definitely talk about the ending because that's the one part I was racking my brain trying to figure out when did this occur, because there was never a scene that I read where I felt like, oh, that definitely happened. Then there's this big reveal at the end. I don't know. I just really like these books. I really enjoyed each of the first three books for very different reasons. Red Rising, you had the very kind of YA, like dark YA kind of academy feel to it with like the medieval fantasy type of stuff that was happening at the Institute. And then Golden Sun, I just did not see the ending coming. So when you jump right into the third book because of everything that happened, you feel a little bit better, but then there's just more emotional punches. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate about Pierce Brown's writing is he makes you care about the characters so much. And so there was one about halfway through this book where I was very upset because I love this character. And then he just kind of fakes you out toward the end as well.
Even the pacing, and I was talking about between chapters, he pretty much did the same thing between books here, right? Like
Yeah.
he ended the second book on some major stuff going on, and it's like, okay, I need to start the third book because I need to figure out what's going on there. So immediately picked that up. The differences in the books were mainly the scope, like you said, where the first one is very small. You're dealing with like a handful of characters. It's not too crazy, and then all of a sudden you get to the second book and you're in space, and there are multiple planets and moons, and you know, it grows quite a bit. And then this one we get all the way out to Jupiter and the outer moons. It does make it feel very different. It's got some Dune vibes to me, like a little bit, some Expanse vibes. You know, so that always that interesting world where things are technologically advanced, but yet they're still using swords. And you know, the thing I think about a lot is like, why are they still hanging people in this world? You know, it's not even very effective, obviously, because people are surviving or it requires extra people to kind of complete the job, so to speak. And so, yeah, there's a lot of symbolism that's important culturally, I guess, to them, where symbolizing a hanging or kind of looking back to the olden days, obviously the strong Roman themes or whatever.
Yeah,
is
that made
important.
me think of Foundation because that one also esteems the Roman Empire as this pinnacle of, human anything. And that theme kind of continues in this series. But I don't want to dance around this anymore. I just want to jump into the big stuff that happened because, as we said at the end of Golden Sun, at Darrow's triumph ceremony, this is the entire low point thus far. I remember walking away from the book thinking, how can he possibly recover from this? Because you had Fitchner beheaded, who is the figurehead of Ares, and then you had Victra seemingly gets killed. You have Nero, who was the big bad for the longest time, killed. Then you have Darrow captured. And then, of course, Mustang, Ragnar, and Sevro were kind of MIA. And then this book picks up, and Darrow has been interrogated for 3 months by the Jackal, and then put into solitary confinement kind of torture for the next 9 months, and he is losing his mind. And then there's like a little twist kind of reveal with this because he thinks he's kind of been kept away from everyone and he's losing his mind and keeps hearing things. And then it turns out he's been underneath
In
the
a
table
table, yeah.
or
I
something.
was trying to understand exactly how that worked.
Yeah, it was strange.
But yeah, he thought he was hearing voices like in his mind, like going crazy, but they were actual voices.
Yeah, and so he kept hearing, the Jackal holding dinners and meetings on this table above him, and that's what he was hearing. And so he comes out of this, and he's met with Cassius and Antonia and Thistle, who was a Howler and betrayed Sevro and Darrow. Then this book picks up with action again because there's immediately this rescue effort to get Darrow out with two characters that were introduced to, a brother and a sister that are Greys, named Trig and Holiday.
We got to talk about Holiday. I know that a lot of people here might not have heard the graphic audio, but she's got this thick Southern accent in the graphic audio. We were talking before, but it reminds me of Alex from The Expanse, where you're like, does this work for me? Because I have this thing when I'm watching media or whatever, and someone's portraying somebody from the South, they always sound ridiculous. I'm a little bit biased, obviously, but it seemed a little over the top, but it did grow on me a little bit. It was a bit alarming, especially because her last name was like Nakamura or something like that too. So I was like, it's the same. Like what Alex had like a name like that too. I feel like. Anyways, you just takes you down a rabbit hole of like, how do they still have Southern accents in this future, in this world, or whatever.
Yeah, it's supposed to be hundreds and hundreds of years in the future, right? I'm like, oh, Southern accent, Southern American accent, still a thing.
Well, you just think about the internet, and the more we're all exposed to each other, the more we all start kind of sounding the same and losing these distinct qualities of ourselves. So, like, why is it a Southern accent is the thing that they thought lasted.
That was strange in the graphic audio. But then you get more backstory about them, like they were raised to be farmers. And anyway, we digress. But there's this huge rescue effort to get Darrow out. So Holiday and Trig bust Darrow out because Jackal orders Darrow to be checked out by Yellows. And so Trig and Holiday just go in there, guns blazing, bust him out. They're in an elevator, a very intense elevator ride, and old Vixis comes aboard. And they kind of manhandle him, and he takes them to Victra because he kind of reveals that Victra is alive, and she has been going through a very similar chain of events as Darrow, being kept in a torture chamber of sorts. And when we meet her, she's very feral. I was kind of worried about where her character would go because I didn't really know if she would be able to recover from that experience.
Well, I didn't think she was alive because she just got stabbed or shot or whatever, like in the back or neck.
Yeah.
And another interesting part about this is the whole reason that Darrow was being moved in the first place is because the Sovereign wanted to dissect him because they were trying to figure out how Reds could even turn somebody into a gold because they didn't think that was possible. So that was the whole reason why it was happening, right?
Yeah.
That he was being checked out by the elves. And we also find out, is it right now? Maybe a little bit afterwards, but we find out that they thought that Darrow was actually dead this entire time as well because they had faked his death on video.
It's when they kind of get to a rooftop scene, right? So Trig ends up getting killed. They had blown an EMP earlier, so they had to resort to using these old style, like gunpowder type of weapons to shoot their way out. And there's that point at the very end where Darrow jumps off the roof with Victra's body because she's been put out. And then Holiday, Drake is left dead, and Ragnar comes to the rescue because the Reds came up drilling, and so they jump off. Ragnar saves Darrow, and he kind of passes out from everything that happened and wakes too. And that's when he learns that Jackal had assassinated a doppelganger of sorts to fool them.
I don't know if it was like CGI or if it was an actual person that they killed, but they did something to make him look like him or what it was. But
basically to try and just like kill the morale of the Red Rebellion and put a stop to that. But we see Uncle Narol again and that kind of thing. So that
whole
was nice.
family.
Yeah, and the mom.
Yes. I want to go back to the part where they're escaping. I'm trying to picture this in my mind of like how it all works, and I'm still confused because it's like they go up to like a roof or like a landing pad where a ship is supposed to come, but there's some sort of shield or something that keeps that ships from being able to actually land there. But then they drill up from the ground and they jump down into the hole where they drilled up or whatever. Like I don't
They're like way up.
This is a common theme in this book where there's like ridiculous escapes where you're just like, what? How did they plan this? How did they actually make this work?
Lots of faith.
I guess the thing about the first book or the first couple of books is it always felt like Darrow was in complete control, right? Like for the most part, like he had a plan, he executed it. Yes, like sometimes things would go like bad, but for the most part, what he wanted to do worked. He was smarter, he was better, he was faster.
This is so lucky.
Well, but this book, I feel like he is constantly the underdog and is doing a lot of stuff like out of desperation and is very lucky in how it works, which I'm sure we'll get to the rest of it. But this is just like step one of the crazy things that he does to escape.
Yeah. The next crazy thing that kind of happens is when the Quicksilver stuff, right?
Yeah.
They're like playing covert recon and sneaking into this building, and they bring Ragnar, right? Sevro's there, and the tension between Sevro and Darrow in this book is really interesting because in the time and the year that Darrow's been gone, Sevro kind of stepped up and filled his father's boots, but he's been handling being the leader of Ares in a very different way.
Yes, he's basically treated all of the Sons of Ares as if they were the Howlers, right? Where everything is just, we're just gonna slink off into the night and assassinate people, and there wasn't a lot of actual leadership, right? Like that works in a vacuum with like a small group, but when you're having to lead giant communities and do large scale strategy, it doesn't really work the same way. And he hasn't had anyone to really tell him no. So everything, has been smash and grab and just kind of guerrilla warfare.
Yeah, that was interesting to see kind of that tension bubble up between Sevro and Darrow. And so they're on, where is it? I'm trying to remember.
Like, Phobos.
It was Phobos. And this is when they learned that Victra's family has this huge, manufacturing company on Phobos, Julii Industries. And so there's still this question of whether they can trust her. And Sevro is definitely of the mindset that Darrow needs to be kind of insulated from Mustang and Victra because he just doesn't think that Darrow is able to follow through on anything, has a bleeding heart for everything.
Yes. Well, yeah, so one of the big plot points from them coming back is just everyone seeing Darrow in a completely different light. Everyone's always seen him as this glorious leader, right? And out of the torture, they're like, he was really messed up. He was very weak and frail and mentally just been abused. And so, yeah, they were kind of kept on the side. They did get recarved. I don't even know what that really... Basically, they were made whole again, I guess. And then they were put on the B Squad for a while. The B team, the Pit Vipers, I think they were called. And then, before this, they eventually made it to the A team. I think one of the most interesting parts we actually skipped was the Howler initiation.
Oh, gross. That was so gross. It was Victra. I think Darrow had actually just taken a shower. It's like he and Victra had just finished something. They were taking a shower, and then they just get jumped. And it turns out to be Sevro and the Howlers, and they're initiating them. But they have to go through these bonkers type of things. And part of it's just getting really, really wasted. And then they bring out a bucket of like pit vipers, cockroaches, and they expect them to just eat it. And I was
lots
gagging.
Of vomiting.
Lots of vomiting, people eating and vomiting. And
the three people that got initiated were Holiday, Darrow, and Victra.
Yeah.
And Holiday apparently killed it. Like, she made it right through. She was like, this is not my first rodeo. But Darrow did like pretty okay, but apparently Victra was not having it. She was over there like throwing up profusely. She couldn't chug the alcohol.
That'd be
It
me.
wasn't going well.
Yeah, that was fun. That was like one of the fun lighter moments because things that happen from here on out in the book, they're just very high stakes, lots of heavy losses. It's when they're leaving Phobos, right? First off, there's like a crazy scene. I think this is the first time that Darrow sees Mustang because they discover that she's in this building meeting with Quicksilver and Cassius, and Aja is there, right?
Yes, there's also some other knights,
Uh-huh.
Moira,
Some
and what,
Olympian
like the
knights.
Truth Knight.
Yeah.
There's too many knights. I can only remember about 4 knights at a time. So, I mean, the big thing about this whole moment is what we were talking about before, which is Sevro and Darrow butting heads the entire time, right? Because Sevro is still smash and grab, and Darrow's like, "Are you paying attention? Like something is up. Like weird stuff is going on." They find Mateo, who they didn't realize was Mateo originally. They're just a pink, all alone in like pajamas or whatever, and they Sevro's like, kill him, like beating him, this kind of stuff. And Darrow's like, hey man, this guy basically helped me get into the academy and taught me how to be a gentleman.
Telemanuses were there too.
Yes, there was a lot of people there.
A lot of gunfire, a lot of shootouts.
Yes. So Severo thought that Quicksilver was basically like in cahoots with the Jackal and was like the money behind all the stuff that the Jackal was doing. And we find out pretty fast from this that that is obviously not what is happening, just based upon the people that are there. Severo and Darrow are bickering the entire time because Darrow's like, this is clearly not right. Please stop. And so at one point, Severo just cuts his communication. They're doing like this weird aside thing where like there's like group chat and they're doing like the outside group chat where they're just like getting mad at each other where no one else can hear. And then eventually Severo's just like puts him on mute.
Cuts his mic.
Yes. And they get in there. And of course, Darrow sees Mustang. He sees, yes, all of the Telemanuses. And it's like, stop. Like, please don't. And no one can hear him. So that's not really how it goes. There's like a huge shootout. People are dying left and right.
It reminds me of Matrix, the scene in the lobby with the columns blowing up and things like just gunpowder everywhere, pieces of column, people, bodies flying around.
Yeah, I get actually a lot of Matrix references in this as well. We didn't even, I don't want to get too off topic, but one of the big ones is there's like a little underground city that's been created called Tinos for all the sons of Ares, and that's where they kind of live. I immediately was like, oh, that's just like Zion or whatever in the Matrix, where I'm just like, all the stuff up above and they're down below, trying to stay away from the machines.
Yeah.
But anyway, huge gunfire, shootout. There's like other silvers there. They're all cannon fodder. They're dead like immediately.
And there's more Obsidians, right? There's like a secret room, but
Yes.
it's blocked by a fallen column. So they're trying to bust out and get to them. So then it becomes a race against the clock to escape and get out of there. This is a scene that kind of reminded me of like Expanse, with Darrow just kind of binding everyone together so that no one flies off. And they like expel all the breath out of your lungs so that you don't, collapse and die out there.
Well, this was like the final fight between Sevro and Darrow, and it was pretty meaningful because Sevro was just like, we're going to fight our way out. Yeah. And Darrow was like, no. And everyone else in the party basically were just like, we're going to do what Darrow wants. So this was a pretty big changing of the guard, kind of a blow to Sevro, like in general.
Yeah.
But, after hearing the plan, I'm like, I think I probably would have gone with Sevro in this one.
I know. It's Darrow, something about him and his crazy plans, because this was very much like in Golden Sun at the beginning, whenever he was like, I'm just going to shoot myself at Pax's ship to try and win this. And they shut off his plan.
Like, no.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. This was Crazy Lucky Thing number 2, I feel like. Where they tried to blow a hole, whatever, like in the building, so they would get like sucked out into the vacuum of space.
And they are. For 2.5 minutes, they're floating around out there before Holiday picks them up, but they do get picked up.
The math doesn't really make sense, but it worked out, I guess.
After all of this is when Darrow and Sevro finally make up, and they kind of just have to come to fists to make up. And Sevro gets all emotional and is crying because he tells Darrow that the reason why he's been acting this way and had been hiding information from him, like he was lying about Mustang not reaching out or anything like that. He didn't want Mustang to make Darrow biased in the things that he needed to do to further the rebellion. He thought that Darrow would hesitate. That's that I don't flinch comment.
Yeah, he only knew one way to handle things, right? The same way that he's done it since the Institute.
Knuckle sandwiches.
Yes, especially without Darrow being there. But for me, the real MVP of this whole situation is actually the guy that led him into the building or the area in the first place, who was a Sons of Ares guy. Just a nameless. I mean,
Was he a red?
I don't remember if he was actually a red, but he was a low color, and he was like a tradesman or something like that. So I can't remember if he was actually a red or a brown or a different color, but he was like an electrician or whatever. We find out a very important thing about Quicksilver here that we've kind of glazed over, which is important to talk about. So you want to talk about what we learned about Quicksilver?
Yeah, we find out that Quicksilver is a founding member of Ares. He knew Fitchner back then, and I'm pretty sure that Sevro was baffled and didn't believe it at first, but he does prove that he was a founding member of Ares. So he's very deeply embedded in this movement as well and willing to do whatever it takes.
Well, he knows Sevro's mom's name and her whole story, right?
Briar, yeah. Like he was very familiar with all of that, and I think that's what finally wins Sevro over. And then from this point on, it's really about Darrow doing what he's done in the past, which is strategizing the different pieces to win the larger effort. And so one of the things that he identifies that they need is an army. They tap in Ragnar because they are going to go to the Valkyrie Spires to appeal to Ragnar's mother, who's the leader of the Obsidians. And remember that the Obsidians were the only other color that ever rose up against the golds and made it kind of far. I mean, not as far as the Red Rebellion, but they were definitely a formidable enemy.
Yes. Sorry to go back a little bit, but I think there's some like important context. So there's like a multi-part plan, right? So they obviously want to get the army, but before that, and this also goes back to when they were deciding whether to fight it out or not, Sevro basically just wanted to blow up like all of Phobos for the most part. Like he wanted to blow up the tower for sure, but he wanted to blow up like the whole place. So my comment earlier, the random like Sons of Ares guy, because he helps them to do the second part of the plan, or the other side of this part of the plan, which is to start a rebellion or like an uprising basically on Phobos. And so that would make the Jackal or the Sovereigns send ships to try and shut it down. And so while they're going to try and get an army of Obsidians, they're also tricking the Jackal into coming, and then they're going to steal all of the ships. But this one guy, who I can't even remember his name, he's got some gall because he just stood up and gave like an impassioned speech in front of like all of these people that have just been like murdering everyone, that are suggesting that they like basically kill everyone on this moon, and he's just like, can't do that. we gotta do something else. And so they do like a little movie or film. They like hack a bunch of stuff to show that Darrow's like still alive, and to try and get all the people onto Phobos, all the low colors to rise up.
Yeah, my favorite scene is how they're in the yacht, like the pleasure yacht, just kind of pretending to blend in so they can quietly sail out of there and go appeal to the Obsidians. Yeah. But Cassius figured that out, and he was tailing them the whole time to the Valkyrie Spires and shoots their ship down. But Ragnar is able to shoulder a missile,
Ragnar,
basically.
Just killing it. So there's this thing, I'm sure it still exists, but I'm an old man now. Back in my old Halo days, there would be a thing where you would throw a sticky grenade on someone and you would die, but then they would still die afterwards, and it would be like killing someone from the grave or whatever.
Very satisfying.
Yeah, Ragnar basically did that. Like, the ship gets blown up, they're like falling down, he just opens the hatch, and like, I forget how they describe it, but I just imagine him with a rocket launcher, looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger out there, and just blowing up Cassius' ship. And then he pulls it off.
And this is when more world building stuff happened that I thought was really cool, because we hadn't really seen the cold, I guess, the poles of Mars. And so their ship crashes into the ice, and this is when we're introduced to these very large ice water maggot creature monster things. And so they're having to lose all of their supplies and weaponry and grab boots and everything under the ice. Mustang comes up, and then Ragnar is the first one. He's still underwater fighting against a really large one. And so Mustang goes down to help. And
the thing that I find interesting about all of this is not just that they're fighting these big creatures, it's why these creatures exist in the first place.
Yes.
Right? Basically, because of that uprising we talked about before, the Golds have been trying to like mess with the minds of Obsidians and manipulate them constantly. And so all of these monsters, I believe, if I remember correctly, are like things that have been carved and created to create this whole like lore and culture of servitude and all that kind of stuff for Obsidians.
Kind of trap them there, like through fear.
Yeah, so it's like I said, just a whole, you've seen the manipulation of the Reds, how they do that, right? Where they're, especially the low Reds or whatever, that are like in the mines, and they've got this whole crazy tactic of how they manipulate them. They have a whole different tactic for how they manipulate Obsidians. And it's a much more like feral thing where they're trying to keep them. But it's basically doing the same thing for both, but just a very different technique.
It is. It's interesting. I didn't think of it that way.
Wow.
My husband, guys.
Wow. So we want to talk about what happens after they get back up on the ice, after like Mustang saves Ragnar. I mean, they're wearing special clothing, but that's all gone to hell now that they've been fighting these giant creatures that have been like messing them up.
Yeah, isn't a storm coming too? Like a very bad freezing one. They will not survive the night if they don't find shelter. So luckily they remember that Cassius was also shot down. And I think that they can see like approximately where and go that general direction. But now the fear is, for Ragnar, there are these people called Eaters, the ones that were cast out. So the Obsidian cannibals that are just very wild and feral and violent. Then it's this really cool kind of cat and mouse game. It's almost like a horror. You go to the crash ship and there's like bodies there and blood, but you know that some people escaped, so Cassius and Aja, and then the Eaters come and they're just kind of picking apart people one by one, just taking them through the woods. Very tense.
Yeah, nothing like a horde of cannibals to brighten your day after crashing your ship into ice.
I know. And then this takes us to like the low point, the halfway mark through the book is where they finally catch up with Cassius and Aja, and Mustang gets this very lucky shot. See, they're very lucky.
I mean, once again, I was trying to understand the logistics of how all of this was happening, because it was Mustang, which, did we even talk about how Mustang got on the ship with them? It was Mustang, Holiday, Ragnar, and Darrow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like Holiday is like sniping somewhere. They've got her like covered so she can't be seen. She's like sniping somewhere. Mustang somehow gets a bow and arrow from all of this. And then Ragnar and Darrow go fight. And Darrow fights Cassius and Ragnar fights Aja. And to be fair, it doesn't go very well for either of them. Darrow basically has to get saved by Mustang. She's able to shoot an arrow that pierces Cassius through the throat. I thought he was dead. Spoiler alert. He's not dead.
I thought he was dead too.
And then Ragnar is like just going out of pure ferociousness at Aja and is just like trying to wail on her, but she's just too well trained. And
she's Lauren's best student or whatever, yes. And she's been also training Cassius.
Yeah, so Ragnar, through like all of this book and whatever, has been pretty much some of the only levity. It's always that weird juxtaposition of like hard brute of a person that says like sweet things or whatever, and like meaningful stuff. Yeah. And so eventually Aja is able to catch him and slices him like in the back, and then quickly starts like stabbing like a crazy person in his stomach as well. Before like slipping, there's some weird thing where she like fell and
she got him off balance. She baited him.
Yeah. Well, he was just too big, like I said, but tactically she was better. But I mean,
he was already dying, like by a million cuts or whatever. Yeah. Slowly.
But still, I was like, I can't remember. She just kind of like fell and was like, she's gone. You knew that she was going to be alive because it was like she wasn't going to die that way.
No.
She was like, fell off into a crevice or whatever.
Yeah, couldn't find her.
So they're all there. They're having a moment, obviously, Darrow and Ragnar. And then all of a sudden they see some stuff flying in the sky.
This is cool.
Yeah. And who was it?
It was Sefi, Ragnar's sister, riding in on a griffin. And this is as Ragnar's dying, which this was one of the most painful scenes to me. You just grow to love the characters. That's what I like about Pierce Brown's writing is I feel like Ragnar really didn't get a ton of just like serious time on page. Like he was always integral to action scenes and these big battles and stuff that were happening. And when he did speak, they were very funny things or very profound things.
Yeah, it's just very direct. And then there's obviously like the comedy or whatever that comes with being very direct when most people wouldn't be direct in these kind of situations. He was, like I said, originally we had Pax that kind of took this kind of situation for me, this role. And then we had Ragnar that kind of filled it after Pax was dead. And now I'm like, hopefully someone else can fill it going forward. But we're kind of left with a void while we're waiting on this kind of person that is almost like Darrow's conscience a little bit, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
throughout the series, he always has like Sevro that kind of, is part of his conscience, and then he would always have this other person, and this other person would be, the one that you would expect to be extreme and only know violence, but they a lot of times would play kind of like the angel, like I imagine all the movies and from like the 90s and stuff where you'd have like the devil on one side and the angel on one side.
Yeah.
I kind of felt like that situation. So now he's lost that angel, and that's why you feel that void so much, or at least why I do.
I'm still sad that Ragnar is dead. Ragnar asked Darrow to kind of put him out of his misery, and this is when Darrow kind of stabs him through the heart, and then they go off and go to the Spires to meet Mommy
Mama.
Ragnar. Mama. Yes, she is quite the woman.
Yes.
And you find out that Alia, I think it's her name, or Alia, she knows the goals aren't gods and is willingly just believing this lie to keep the status quo and doing what she's told. It's when Sefi kind of learns that about her mother is when she finally gets on board with Darrow and what Ragnar wanted. And so there's a lot of gold slaying on this because they have their Asgard place that they send Darrow and them off to.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of killing. It is interesting because it's Asgard, but they kill them and then they kill a couple of them. If one of them was a Proctor too, Proctor Mercury, I think, which was also interesting. And then they go back and yeah, they tell Mama, like they're like, "Hey, you gonna be cool?" And she's like, "Nope, not gonna be cool."
And then Sefi takes her head.
Pretty
That was
much.
satisfying.
It was, yeah.
And Ragnar knew it would come to that too.
Yes,
because
there's a lot.
he tried warning Darrow ahead of time that it was going to come to violence to solve it and get the Obsidians. But they do get that army. And then you have like the scene of just all these ships hauling Obsidians back to Mars. Is that where
Yeah,
they are?
they
To live in the tunnels?
Yeah, because there's people are a little bit nervous because
Yeah.
because it's not a great situation, right? You have a bunch of people, like more and more people that are kind of living in squalor in this area, and they're like, "Hey, we're about to introduce like 100,000 like giant brutes with them as well."
And they need to eat a lot. They need more space.
Yeah.
And so tensions are high. And you have kind of Uncle Narol being this facilitator and trying to make sure everyone gets along, which kind of plays a factor a little bit later on when things kind of go down the shithole.
Yeah, I mean, Uncle Narol, after being much maligned in the first book, really kind of showed up in the rest of the series. Like
So he's working behind the scenes. But isn't that what Darrow's father or someone told him in the first book at the very beginning about Uncle Narol?
I don't remember exactly.
I feel like someone spoke very highly of Uncle Narol, and Darrow was always like, I don't see it. Like, what does he do all day?
Yeah, he's basically a drunkard that wasn't ever willing to take risk. Like when it came to the drilling and stuff like that, it was always very cautious.
No, he was working on this behind the scenes. And then we have the reasoning for them going to the outer rim, meeting with Romulus,
Jupiter's moons.
Yes, because they need, I guess, his ships, his fleet.
Yeah, so there's basically, because of the end of the second book, there's been it was the end of the second book and the beginning of this book. We basically learned that Romulus it was no longer part of the Sovereign or whatever because he found out that his family was killed during the Triumph. And actually, in the very beginning, we hear that Mustang had gone with him and his fleet to fight or whatever, but that got put down quickly by Roque. But anyway, so Romulus is the only other person that has a bunch of ships and basically isn't loyal to the Sovereign. It's kind of like an in-between person right now. And so they're trying to hopefully acquire all of these ships before they pledge loyalty to other places.
Yes, and the really cool thing about this scene with Romulus is they're not the only one beseeching him, asking for his support with their ships because Cassius beat them there. And so Cassius has been in party there. And so you have this little confrontation scene between Cassius and Darrow afterward that I thought was really sad and moving. Not Cassius, Roque.
Well, yeah,
Why am I letting me call him?
No, there was an important part with Cassius before this that is very important to this conversation. So after they had captured Cassius eventually tells them that the Jackal had stolen like 300 nuclear bombs or something like that, which is very important for this conversation.
They're like towing the line. It's like a lie, but not. They're attributing it to the wrong person.
So yeah, when they're both basically doing their sales pitch to Romulus of why he should join their side or whatever, Roque is starting to win because obviously the Sovereign has way more resources in general and can just offer him a lot more. But then Darrow is like, oh, well, that's great, but did you know that they have 300 nuclear bombs and they're going to blow up whatever they want if you don't do what they say? And that's kind of the last ditch effort that helped him to get Romulus on his side.
That and asking how his daughter died at the triumph ceremony.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing was very interesting. Romulus was like, it was all about pageantry. If you know, it felt like it was very like about not really pageantry, but like a procession and things have to be done a certain way. Yeah, so you weren't allowed to like attack each other or anything like during this. Like it was very, I don't know, whatever the word is.
The Pirates of the Caribbean parlay.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like a negotiation, and it wasn't going to let anything bad happen, even though they could have killed Roque right then and made their lives a million times easier.
Yeah, I think it was just sad because you saw Roque and Darrow have such a good brotherly relationship in the first couple of books, you know, until the betrayal and everything. But then you just kind of fully understand that Roque is just kind of this gold elitist through and through.
Yeah, he's a
and
lost cause.
Always gonna pick his color side.
You're telling me that someone that always recites poetry is pretentious, maybe?
What's wrong with poetry? Wow.
I mean, if you only recite it all the time when you talk to people, it's like he doesn't even have normal conversations. Just everything is.
He was like a romantic at heart, and he had one too many loves get killed on his watch, I guess.
I don't know.
Leah and Quinn. But yeah, and then it's a very intense scene of space battle, and this is when you started having some issues with it because you're like, how is this even happening? Because Darrow's flying the Pax right into the middle of Roque's Sword Armada fleet, just kind of spearing into it, and then they're kind of attracting all of Roque's fleet to attack them. Meanwhile, they're drilling through their own ship that have been retrofitted like claw drills so that they can then infiltrate the Sword Armada.
The amount of times Pierce was able to shoo in claw drills or whatever drill claws, what are they?
I mean, it's the Red Rising.
Every time that something happens, they're like, well, what are we going to do? We're going to tunnel our way through. Works every time. It's the ultimate trump card. Just bring out the claw drill.
I thought it was a fun scene.
The thing that I liked about this is that Darrow basically has a reputation for being a little bit brash and doing, you know, like Sandra was talking about earlier, like he was the guy that was going to shoot himself out of a ship to go take it like single-handedly, right?
Just to win.
And so they didn't have the numbers in this fight. So what he did was basically play into what Roque probably considered, which is that he was very brash. And so, yeah, he created this big, I don't know what the military maneuver would be called, like a pinch or whatever, but basically just tried to shoot the gap and ended up sacrificing a bunch of ships to make this happen.
Including the Pax.
And then, yeah, got really, really close and then made it seem like their ship was dead. And so they were wanting basically everyone to come and try and infiltrate the Pax. And while they did that, they just kind of slipped out the back by drilling through their ship and then using rocket power or something to shoot the drills over to the other ship.
Yeah, I think Orion was helping kind of steer them to the Colossus. I think it's the name of the Moonbreaker ship.
This is lucky maneuver number 3 or 4 or whatever, where you're like, okay, like a bunch of the drills were getting shot out of the sky or whatever.
They don't really have a lot of options, right? Their hand is in a way forced, so they're having to just be creative, and it's crunch time. So it's just like desperate times, desperate measures.
But it's
also
like
Mustang she's floating around out there. Roque is very much planning on annihilating her because she has no control of her ship.
But my point is, it's like you're playing poker, and he has just gone all in, like 6 hands in a row. He's just like, oh, all in. Like, if it doesn't work out, everything is over. Each time he does it. I'm just like, I'm just going to go all in again.
He's lucky.
He makes his own luck, I guess.
A key part of that luck working in these instances is he had to learn to trust everyone, too, because he used to keep everyone else out of those plans and just do it kind of secretly behind the scenes, and everyone had to be forced to just trust that Darrow had a plan. This time, especially toward the end that we see, he actually enlists people he cares about to help him carry out these plans. And I think that's the difference.
I mean, someone's got a crazy plan. That's all I know. And it works, so I guess.
It did. I did like the scene where they're trying to get into what is the room called?
The bridge.
The bridge. They're trying to get into the bridge to get to Roque before Mustang's killed. And they've been just getting slammed into locked door after locked door, having to get through each door. And then finally the bridge just like pops open and there's like a little pink, just like press the button. They're like holding their remote, like hiding from Roque, and they just let them kind of waltz in. And then this was kind of heartbreaking scene number I don't know in this series, because even though you hate Roque and the things that he did were unforgivable, you still want to believe that there was more brotherly love and a connection between them, and he still was just nope.
Hope that it wouldn't be so black and white, right? Like have some nuance, but it was like, no, sorry, you're red, I'm gold,
and I'm just gonna kill myself now. Yeah, so that was sad, but we get some satisfaction because Victra goes after Antonia. Like Antonia just stole her ship, took her ships, and kind of ran away, and Victra pursued because she's an angry sister.
Yeah, so even though that they took the primary ship in this fight when they were able to take Roque's ship, which was like a moonbreaker or something like that, but the fight wasn't actually over. But for whatever reason, Antonia was like, I'm not going down. And so just ran off and then made it a much easier fight because then they could basically surround and kill everyone else.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, not only did she run, but then Victra was able to chase her down and reclaim all the ships. Probably the worst plan anyone had in the books. Like, not only did you leave when you still had a chance, you made it worse.
Antonia was just like, oh shit, my sister hates me, and so does Darrow. I've done some pretty evil things. I'm going to run away. And also, what was really interesting about this part of the book, too, was Darrow was having to do these compromises that were very, very hard to make, right? So with Roque, after Roque killed himself, he made the decision to blow up the docks of Ganymede and blame it on Roque so that they could then render Romulus kind of not a thing yet.
Darrow makes a lot of sacrifices in this book in general. That wasn't even the first,
Yeah, Romulus.
Yeah, so part of the thing with Romulus as well is that he told him that he would tell him all of the sons of Ares that are on Jupiter's moons or whatever, Io specifically, I think. So he was giving up his own people in order to get these ships. And then here, he knew that he could get away with it, that they would still think it was Roque. And so he shot the docks, but the docks are being worked by all low colors or whatever. So he killed more millions of low colors. So the price of
winning?
Battle? Yeah, I don't know. But
it was definitely one of those moments where, thinking of it ethically, you were like, wow. Who are we becoming, Darrow?
Yeah, well, and this is the other big part about the scope creep and all that kind of stuff that we were talking about is like in the first book, you're feeling bad when he had to kill a singular person, right? Like, he had to kill Julian. That's brutal, right? You're like, oh, this is horrible. And it's like by the third book, he's like, maybe I'll just kill like 10 million people. Like, no big deal.
Which by the end of the book, this becomes a thing because some stuff with Jackal and what Jackal and his Boneriders are doing. It's the juxtaposition between Jackal and Darrow's decisions and what they're trying to, each accomplish is very similar paths, I feel like. I don't feel like Darrow's scope was as big as Jackal. Like, I don't think he was willing to do that much. Jackal has no kind of moral compass whatsoever.
Yeah.
A number is a number. But Darrow at least still has that kind of humanity to him.
But yeah, they both were willing to make sacrifices.
Yeah. Some of the lighter scenes that I liked about this book is they kept teasing like this romance developing between, I know I'm bringing up romance and you're just like eye roll.
It's the best part.
Yeah. Between Victra and Sevro, which I thought is just such, because Sevro is this short, kind of weird looking, half red, half gold. Victra's this tall gold, and they end up getting married after all of this stuff happens, and it seems like a little high point for them. And Jackal even calls in and congratulates them.
So apparently the Jackal has some spies on the ships, which is interesting, but that also kind of goes into their tactics, right? Because anytime they're capturing these ships, we've seen it multiple times now, they don't kill the crew or do anything to the crew. They basically say, you can join us or you can leave, but you'll be like in prison. But like large portions of all these crews are formerly from like the Sovereign or Jackal's crews or whatever, which I found to be an interesting
very bold and
tactical choice. Yeah. I'm like, you think about modern day and stuff getting leaked, and you're just like, I can imagine one person on this giant ship is like, hey, by the way, we're not going to Mars.
Yeah.
We're going to Luna.
And then you see just with Darrow's plans with Sevro and Cassius even, like all of that just falls into place so perfectly at the end with how they handled that. But I mean, after this whole Roque situation and the docks of Ganymede, then they're facing another battle, right?
Yeah, they're trying to decide what exactly they're going to do.
They're trying to fake everybody out and make them think they're going to Mars. Meanwhile, Darrow is communicating to Orion and everyone on his ship oh, we're gonna release Cassius before this. As you're reading this as a first timer, we're both like, no, why would you do that?
You're leaving out a very important part
What?
before this.
What?
So after Roque dies, he has like a hollow cube or whatever. I don't know all of the
Oh.
technology terminology in here. There's a hollow cam or whatever. He has some sort of device to see videos, and Roque has a bunch of videos from the Institute, and Darrow watches like several of them, and then he goes and gets Cassius, and they watch all of these videos from the Institute together, and they're like really chumming it up.
Drinking.
Yeah, they got some whiskey or something or scotch or something that they're drinking and watching all of these videos. And eventually, at the very end, he's like, "I got one more. Why don't you like watch it on your own or something like that?" And he gives them a thing, but then they all go back.
What did you think he gave Cassius to watch by himself?
I didn't really know. I just felt like despite this, like there's been several times when he's had this kind of similar standoff situation with Cassius since the Julian thing, where it's like,
and he gets fucked over.
Yes, it has not gone well, right? Like that's, I don't know, we could probably go through the list and name them all, but several times it's been like, okay, this is the time I could trust Cassius, and it never goes well.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, we're about to do this one more time, I guess.
Yeah, for some reason I thought Darrow was giving Cassius the Julian passage scene to prove to Cassius that it didn't go down like you thought it was. Like, I did this.
It's a bold strategy.
I know.
See,
and so the whole time I'm reading
off.
this, I'm like, is that what he just gave Cassius to watch? Why would he do that? That's just going to inflame him. And so when Darrow announces to Orion and the crew that they're going to release Cassius quietly and then go off to Mars and do their thing.
I thought he didn't announce it.
He told it to Orion, and she was just like, do you really think that's a good decision?
But they were keeping it very secret, so
Yeah.
like not many people really know.
Like they were going to table him, like cart him out secretly.
Which, once again, I'm like, if you have these big crazy strategies, and this goes back to like not knowing if the people in your ship are gonna tell or not.
Yeah.
It's like this all seems to be something that could have backfired very badly.
I mean, speaking of things that backfired, we had the jail scene with Antonia and Thistle. This is what I'm talking about when Pierce Brown makes you care about characters, because Thistle has been gone the whole time. She betrayed them, but you see her show remorse and she wants to fix it and help. And then by the time Darrow and everyone at Victra are like, what is Antonia up to? It just makes you hate her even more too. And then you see her like just reach through the bars and bash Thistle to death like a pulp. And by the time they get to the prison to stop her, I mean, they're done, but Victra at least gets to bash Antonia's face in.
It is interesting because like you don't get a lot of time with the Howlers, right? Like usually they're giving little kind of like witty responses is like all that you ever get from them. So this is like one of the first times that we get a Howler outside of Sevro kind of showing a little bit more, I feel like.
Yeah.
And so yeah, you are like, Thistle's like redeemable or whatever, and then also apparently stupid.
Yeah. Definitely not the strategic one.
Manipulated by Antonia very easily and then gets her head caved in.
Delicious. Yummy.
Yeah, but yeah, at least we got to see Antonia get her face bashed in as well.
Yeah, and then you get to see her punished later. I remember when they were releasing Cassius, and then all of a sudden Cassius takes Sevro's gun, fires it at him. And this is right after the wedding. And so I feel like from A Song of Ice and Fire or Game of Thrones, now I'm just, anytime there's like super, really happy, fun things happening, you know, something crushing is going to happen. And this was that crushing moment. After this, I could not put the book down. I was like, are you serious right now? Like, you knew Cassius was going to betray them and all, so you're just going through the emotions.
It was like, we're really doing this again?
Yeah.
And that was, for me, I'm trying to understand, like, how is it all going to work out? Because it's like, they still got a battle. There's only like 100 pages. And I know there's more books after this, but I assume there's going to be like a nice wrapping up because this was like the original trilogy or whatever. So I was like, how are they possibly going to wrap all of this up?
On a dark note.
Yeah, well, it's just like, is it going to be like super dark? Like, well, they died and it got snuffed out, and that's how the book ends. I was like, I doubt that's how it's going to be. But it was like, what else possibly could it be?
Yeah, your comment about these crazy, very desperate, lucky plans. This is the big final one, and it involves Cassius being in on it, Mustang, Sevro having
it's Mustang's plan, right?
Yeah, I do like her for this too.
She got the craziest plans of them all, apparently.
She kind of speaks Darrow's language that way.
Yes, they finish each other's.
Wow.
Sentences.
Obviously, that's not us. But, I mean, some things don't go exactly according to plan because Jackal has Cassius take Darrow's hand, which he does it. They're like carrying Sevro's body, trying to preserve as many pieces of him as possible, until they can get an audience with the Sovereign.
Yeah, did you even say Cassius shoots Sevro like
Yeah,
6 times?
yeah.
Okay.
He took his gun,
Took his
shot him
gun.
several times, and this is when I was mad. I was upset because Sevro is my favorite character in the book. But
With his red eyes, Darrow's eyes.
Darrow's eyes. Yes, that is kind of creepy. But he was like, "You want him back? I'll give him back." I'm like, "What are you gonna do? Pull your eyeballs out of your skull?" He's like, "No, you can keep them." But yeah,
Yeah, so I'm like, I don't know how they thought this was ever going to work out. Because how would they know they would go to the Jackal? How would they know they get sent to the Sovereign or whatever? But yeah, the Jackal has Cassius cut his arm off. He takes Sevro's gun, also very important.
knew he was kind of
Yeah, how do they know he's going to take?
like that.
They're like, he likes his trophies.
He does like trophies.
And then eventually they get sent to the Sovereign on Luna or wherever they're at. Yeah, Luna. And it's at like a deep bunker, like underground.
The part here where I was just like, "Come on, you guys really didn't see this coming," is the whole time they have this question of what happened to the 300 nukes. Right? And then they're like, why is the Jackal here? Why is the Jackal making these asshole comments to the Sovereign and just getting away with it with no slap on the wrist, nothing? And so no one's putting those pieces together. And I'm like, if my dumbass can sit here and put together that something is off with the nukes, that's what he's holding over her head. What is going on with you guys? But that whole scene at the end it was
nuts.
so it was nuts, but like in a good way, because the action happening, you have Aja, who is just one of the scariest forces in this book on a physical level, just kicking everybody's ass.
Still, they had to have everything go right. There was a decent amount of people in the bunker, and at one point Darrow made like a comment or something that made them think that the Obsidian were coming by land or something, because there's a fight happening in space or whatever right now, where like they're the Red Armada, whatever they call themselves, is fighting the Ash Lord or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all fighting on like the dark side of the moon or whatever. There's apparently this other plan where Jackal's going to bring ships in that kind of crush everyone, because no one thought that the Jackal was going to be on Luna. They thought he was going to still be on Mars.
Yeah, but he's dispatched his Boneriders,
Yeah.
Lilith.
And then somehow Darrow convinces them that they've actually got Obsidians like on the ground, even though they don't. So like a bunch of people that were in the room leave to go like deal with that. Yeah, so there's less people in the room.
But there's still Aja, the Olympian Knights. Lysander was in there. That's something that sucked really bad. Which, speaking of, the wrap up of this trilogy, I guess, and where the saga will go, there were too many parallels for my comfort with the story of Nero being taken in as kind of a ward by Cassius's family. And Cassius has said multiple times family is like the most important thing to him. And he basically, after all this is said and done, takes Lysander under his wing to raise him up as his own. And I'm thinking the whole time, Lysander is old enough to know the gravity of the situation and to hold a grudge. And he's a smart kid.
Yes. Yeah, he's shown to be very competent, like has strong, not only regular intelligence, but like emotional intelligence.
Yes, very strategic.
Yes.
He's the one that was like, call my grandfather up, the Ash Lord, because he doesn't want Rhea 2.0 to happen. With all of these, I think there's like 12 nukes that go off from the Boneriders.
Man, you were skipping.
I know. This is
so
what I do.
Okay. So we'll just
my brain.
Not that we have to recap the entire thing, but guess what? Sevro's not actually dead. And Cassius is on their side. So the Jackal's throwing his weight around, basically being like, I'm going to do all this. I'm going to be the one that kills Darrow. They've decided that they're going to record this and send it out to everyone to show that Darrow is dead, to try and snuff out the uprising. He goes to go shoot Darrow with Sevro's gun, and he pulls trigger and like nothing happens or whatever.
And this is when Darrow starts howling.
Yeah, it's like
ooh, chills.
Well, yeah, so Darrow starts,
because they're trying to broadcast this for the Sovereign.
Yeah, they're already recording. They're like live streaming this. Note to the streamers out there, maybe record it and then just edit it a little bit before you do it. maybe don't live stream your own death.
Works.
Yeah, whatever. Just a basic hint there.
Yeah.
But yeah, as soon as he tries to do it, Darrow's like laughing. Cassius immediately kills like 4 people.
They rally.
Yes.
Mustang, she's trying to hold her own.
They take out all of the big people very quickly. Darrow comes out of there with one hand, like he's Luke Skywalker, and stabs he kills one person and then he stabs through the Jackal's arm, which apparently is his go-to move because that's what he did at the Institute as well, right? Where he like stabbed through her arm and pinned him. I thought the Jackal was gonna be like have no hands. He was gonna cut off that one too and just be nubbing it around, but I guess not.
No, instead he ripped out his tongue. Because that's his true weapon. Which that was kind of gruesome, right?
Yeah, I think I pulled on my tongue for like the next like 10 minutes afterwards. I'm like,
how does this work?
That seems like
how
pretty
do you
tough.
get a grip on that?
Yeah, it's pretty slippery.
Just dig in and yank really hard.
Yeah, I'm like, can you? I guess you can live without a tongue. You see people get their tongues like cut out or whatever a lot, but I'm like, ripped out, not for me.
Yeah, but yeah, all this to say, Lysander
that no one can defeat Aja.
Yes, I mean, I forget who finally took her down. It took Sevro coming back.
Well, they had to wake Sevro up, yeah, because they could not beat Aja 3-on-1.
But wasn't this scene so funny because Sevro's coming to and he's like in shock that he came back alive and he's very high adrenaline. Same thing like when Darrow was injected with this, pit bite, burst, snake bite kind of venom type of stuff to bring him back, like jolt him back.
It's just adrenaline, like straight to the heart or whatever.
And it's just a very crazy scene. I enjoyed it. I was quite satisfied. I was glad that Sevro was alive.
Did Darrow kill the Sovereign? The Sovereign wasn't dead, but was like bleeding out.
Yeah, Lysander was just holding her the whole time.
Yeah, but then they finally kill Aja, and then for whatever reason, the Jackal starts laughing like a crazy person or whatever because they want to go kill the Jackal, and then he basically spills the beans. That's like, mess with me, and I'm gonna start exploding nukes all over the place.
Millions of people every time a nuke goes off. It takes them 12 with the Ash Lord's help. They stop it. And then you see them, after all of this, they're trying to put together like democracy essentially, even though Mustang is appointed the new sovereign. And I guess if someone has to be, she's the most level person, I guess.
Well, this was an interesting culture thing as well. She just like walked in there and was like, I'm the boss. And they're like, yes, you are the boss now.
They were sitting there meeting about who was going to be the new boss.
Well, it's just like the only thing that people respect in this world is force, really, power, right? And so just by like killing the sovereign and then just walking up with a scepter and being like, I'm the boss now, they're like, okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But they have gathered a lot of low colors like along the way as well to kind of like back her up, right? Weren't there like a bunch of Obsidians and stuff like around?
Yeah, they love Mustang. We didn't even talk about how Sevro, in order to stop after Jackal executed Uncle Narol, and all of a sudden it was low colors versus high colors, and Mustang was alone on the ship with the Telemanises, and they needed to get to her to put a stop to it. And Sevro, as he says, takes a page out of Darrow's book, and in order to get Sefi to stop executing Cassius and them, executes himself.
There's a lot. There's so many things to talk about.
There's so many big things, but that's what I like about the book.
I do question this choice of getting people to fall in line by hurting yourself. I wasn't really sure about it when Darrow did it the first time, and I definitely wasn't sure about it this time. I was like,
whippings.
Yeah, he had Pax, whip him or whatever, and then they were like, okay, this is the guy like that I'll follow or whatever. It was at least a progression of learning, right? Because the first time he killed Titus, and that created a lot of issues, including he's still dealing with it, with characters now. And then the second time he got himself whipped, although Tactus, that kind of worked out, but not really.
I think Tactus would have changed. And I think Lorne even came out and like said it before
he regretted
it. He regretted it. I think Tactus could have changed. But anyway, it's too late.
That's the real question we're trying to answer. Can you change Tactus?
One thing I liked about this book is, since book 1, Jackal Adrius is treated as this very evil, unredeemable character too. You don't really know any of the drive behind why he is this way, but you do get like snippets of their upbringing with how Nero was very heartless whenever Mustang and Adrius's mother miscarried with her would-have-been sister, and how she commits suicide, and how Adrius was always wanting to be looked upon with favor, like in his father's eyes. Like he was trying to please his father, right?
Yeah.
And so it kind of gives a little bit of humanity, not much because he's still a detestable person, but that just makes the gravity of the scene where Jackal is being hanged for his crimes against humanity and everyone that much weightier, because you saw that Mustang still struggled with loving her brother.
Yeah. What I liked about it, the way that all of the bad people are in this book, is like they're always kind of like originally presented as just pure evil, right? You immediately hear Nero's like speech about people or whatever, like at the beginning of the book, and then later again when they like show up in Red Rising, and you're just like, this guy is just like pure evil. But then yeah, you hear about the backstory about his
What?
family and like all the stuff.
But then what he did as payback to Cassius,
Yes.
the Bologna family, with the
Yes.
wife.
So yeah, I mean, I'm not saying he's a good guy, but like, you at least some of the stuff is like understandable. And it was the
Yeah.
same with the Jackal or whatever. Like,
But it's that stuff that makes me worry about the next 3-4
Lysander.
books with Lysander, because yes, Lysander is calm and collected and he's very intelligent and emotionally stable and stuff, but there is a threshold, and it's, did the threshold get reached? Because Lauren's dead from the last book, his grandmother's now dead. You have Cassius raising Lysander, which I think, I don't know. I want to trust Cassius, but I'm like, is he playing a long game? I don't know.
You never trust a Bologna. That's the only thing I've learned
Never
from
trust
this.
a Bologna. I feel anxiety.
Well, the thing that's, even weirder about the Lysander situation is like, yeah, he was already a captive and now he's a two-time captive or whatever, because he was originally his Lorne's grandson or whatever, and then was taken as a captive by the Sovereign, and then, grew up with the Sovereign, and now the Sovereign is killed and then taken by Cassius. So like, he is cool, calm, and collected, but what are the chances he's normal? Like 0% or maybe 1%.
This is
like,
too much.
I don't think you get through life with that amount of trauma and come out and be a stable person. But
Yeah, I can't remember how old Lysander is, but then, the
10.
big reveal at the end is Mustang had been off page a lot and no one knew what she was really up to, and she was hiding a child that she had with Darrow. And I was sitting here trying to think, when did they ever hook up like that for that to be a thing? And I'm assuming because Darrow was carved, that's why he's able to impregnate the gold for
Yeah,
really reals
I
to have a
don't
baby.
I don't know. I don't know the logistics of it, but
Yeah.
because there was nothing more than ever like kisses or like snuggling.
Yeah, it was like
described in the
the
book.
instant there was romantic tension, it was a fade to black. The
Yeah.
instant that kind of stuff started happening.
Plus, like I said, you never knew because everything was pure tension. Like it was the will they won't they the entire time. It's like,
Well, you spent so much time thinking about EO.
and there's also time jumps, like in this book more so than the other ones. Like specifically when they're going from Phobos to Luna, they said it's going to take like 6 months, and we really didn't get much in between explaining like what was going on. And so yeah, I mean, there was just, they're like, are they even together? Kind of, like I don't. The whole thing. There's a lot in this book about him having to prove himself to her that he was like the right person. So it was like they weren't together this entire time. Like, were they? I don't know.
She had to make sure that, the father of her child was a good person.
What else does he have to do, man?
Everything.
He's already done it all. Just give him a claw drill and let him go to work.
Oh, geez. Here we go. So.
Yeah, and not just that, but after they blew up the ship where Lilith was detonating the nukes from or whatever, the Ash Lord, he ran away off to Mercury and Venus, I believe. So we've got that whole thing going on there. We have all the stuff still going on in Jupiter and the surrounding moons. I'm sure they'll find out what actually happened because that's how these things tend to go.
Yeah, I think Romulus had a pretty good inkling.
Oh yeah. He did bring it up. Like, where were the nukes at? We didn't find any nukes.
Yeah, weird how that happened, Darrow. Eh?
His ploy with Roque did work because even the Sovereign was like, "Oh yeah, Roque did a good job of blowing up the docks on Ganymede or whatever."
Yeah, just loyal to the end.
Except that was also one of the depressing parts about Roque's death. It's like he's not going to be known as like a great warrior or whatever, even though he did like amazing things. They're going to be like, they're going to flush him down the toilet as soon as he is no longer helping their cause. Yeah, I think you've got obviously still antagonists like around. They're all kind of a weird, like, none of them are like true enemies, but they're definitely not friends. So they have weird situations going on. And then you've got the fallout of like everyone being blown up on Luna.
Yeah, it's going to take many, many years for anyone to recover to a point of, and just grudges kind of festering over these years.
Yeah, I don't, like, I only know what they say, what would happen if nukes blew up on Earth, but they always act like if there's like a bunch of nukes that blew up on Earth, it'd create like a big covering around the Earth and then all plants would die. Like, it would be like catastrophic. And so I assume, while maybe not the exact same scenario would happen on the moon, It would be very, very bad for anyone living on the moon. And then obviously you also are going to have probably a lot more uprising of low colors. Like who knows like what's going to go on here. You might have low colors murdering golds all over the place or vice versa.
Yeah.
So
you already know that they're unhappy about this blending effort to get everyone on equal footing. So
yeah. Or what, what's going to happen to
it was
Tinos? Are they going to try and move like 1,000,000 people to the surface? Like there's going to be like resource issues. Like
you're gonna have these society loyalists
Yeah.
very upset about this, fighting against that.
And you're probably the only way to make sure that things go smoothly is probably to show like a lot of power, but that doesn't seem like a Mustang way of going about this kind of stuff. So you're gonna have people doing all kinds of nasty things, I'm sure. She'll be considered weak if she's like promoting low colors up and all. Like, what's gonna happen when all of the servants and stuff decide they don't have to be servants anymore, or the people mining Helios or whatever?
Helium-3, yeah.
Yeah, they don't have to do that anymore, right? And that's like the fuel to get around the universe. Like, you're talking about major catastrophic issues that could bubble up.
I don't think they thought about this. Sons of Ares. I don't think they really thought.
Yeah, what are you gonna do when you actually win, right? What's the thing? What's the dog gonna do if he actually catches the car? Kind of situation.
Yeah.
Was that a Batman reference? Was that a Joker thing? Wouldn't know what to do with it. Basically, Heath Ledger over here. So, I don't know. Any other thoughts?
I thought it was a good wrap up to the first 3 books, but there are still enough major red flags for what's on the horizon that I will be picking this up ASAP to finish reading. Yes. And so I recently learned that there is a 7th and final book coming out. That's still 4 more books total. And then we plan on, of course, reading the prequel Sons of Ares volumes 1 through 3. Gotta read those.
Now I just need the graphic audio people to step up their game. I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to have to do if I have to listen to this without the graphic audio.
Yeah, apparently we were very lucky and got to read the graphic audio for the first 3 books in full. And since GraphicAudio releases it in part 1 and part 2 for each book, this one has part 1 of its graphic audio coming out like mid-November. So we're just going to have to read the old-fashioned way or just the regular audiobook. But I hear good things about that one too.
You really messed this up for me. You should have waited at least a few more years so I could have all of them.
And then... Oh yeah? Well, when the adaptation's out, which I'm hearing there's supposed to be an adaptation for this at some point. And I just think this is going to make for really, really good TV.
Yeah. Should be interesting.
Anywho, I'm glad my husband was able to hop on and talk to me about Morningstar.
Oh yeah, so good.
He indulged me, and I don't know, what the plan is for Iron Gold and Dark Age and Lightbringer, but we're going to read those together this time since we're now caught up at the same place.
I don't know if it's within me to read a book called The Dark Age after this. It's making me a little bit nervous. It's a little ominous. So
it is. I'm like,
I've got a feeling the next book doesn't go very well, but guess we'll see.
Guess it'll be a surprise. Anyways, thanks for watching. Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.